Hold on. Sorry, guys. Yes, I got you. I still only have, we have a lot of people that, oh, here
Juliet,
comes Juliet. Okay, this will make 9. We're good.
We're good. Yay, Juliet's here.
go team.
All right. Okay. This is Daniel Smith of Deep River, Secretary, calling this uh, April 28th meeting of the Regional Housing Committee to order. And we have a minute approval of the minutes for March 24th. Um, can we do that? Did everybody see the minutes? All right. All those in favor of approval, say aye.
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 All right. So I guess that passes. Is
I'm
anyone
gonna, you
opposed?
know what I'm gonna do, Daniel? I'm gonna say that you made that motion. I just need someone to second it.
Oh, right.
Second from East Haddam.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. All right. So we're good though. Everybody, no one opposed.
Yes.
All right. So I think the next thing I have jumping to my agenda screen is the housing growth plan, regional existing conditions data update. Is Megan doing that one?
Yes,
Sure is.
All
that
right.
is me. I am sorry. I apologize in advance.
That's fine.
Or
All right. Well, I hand it over to Megan.
thank you. All right, I'm going to share my screen, get situated with my 3 monitors here. So we're going to make sure we get the right one. All right, are you seeing the presentation?
Yes.
All right, and not my note slide to confirm. Okay, so according to our schedule, we're starting with the regional existing conditions. And we really wanted to start from this point because if you recall from our last go around with the housing needs assessment, one of the things that was missing was we were using the data from our housing plan that was adopted in 2022. And there was a lot of conversation about how we needed to understand where the data was now, where the trends were going, and kind of what policies we were aiming towards as we were working into addressing our housing needs. So we're starting with existing conditions so that we can see how the trends have changed since we adopted the regional housing plan in 2022. A few months ago, we asked that you all refresh yourselves on what was in our regional housing plan. In case you didn't, here's a little cheat sheet. We did a baseline assessment at the beginning of that plan where we looked at demographics, housing characteristics, and economics or jobs and workers, understanding that housing doesn't exist in a vacuum and all 3 of these things influence each other. The key findings from that plan were that all of these things were in a sort of stagnant to declining trend. And we were attempting to address that with some of our housing strategies. I want to start with a disclaimer about the data that we are using. We had to make some decisions in the interest of consistency. So the regional housing plan used decennial data, that was 2020. There's a rule for comparison of census data that you can only compare decennial data against other decennial data, which means we would be stuck with using 2020 data again. And we didn't want to do that. So we also can't use the ACS 1-year estimates, which can be compared year over year, because that data doesn't exist at the town level. It would be regional only, and we want the numbers to be able to aggregate across. So we made the decision to use the ACS 5-year estimates so that we can use the most recent available data, 2024, and we can do it at both the regional and the town level, and they'll match. ACS 5-year estimates can only be compared with other non-overlapping years of ACS 5-year data. So you'll see 2014, 2019, and 2024 as our comparison years. So as we're looking at trends, this means that the numbers we're using aren't going to match exactly what's in the regional housing plan. So if you're doing a direct side-by-side comparison, the numbers will be a little bit different, but this is our explanation as to why that is. Remember, no census data is going to be an exact count. It's all an estimate. And for planning purposes, that is okay. So starting with demographics, why are we looking at demographics for housing? They tell us about the people that are living in the region, and they help us make assumptions about the type of housing that we need in order to support different groups. So the key data points that we're going to look at total population, total households, household size, and the age of our population. Our population overview, you can see 2014, 2019, 2024. Population declined by 1.4% between 2014 and 2019 using the ACS 5-year estimates, and this is consistent with what we found in the regional housing plan using the decennial data. The population then grew by 1.7% between 2019 and 2024, so we saw a bit of a recovery. As of 2024, the population in the region, we had 175,822 residents. During that same period, the number of households increased from 70,648 in 2014 to 74,068 in 2024, but household size declined from 2.3 in 2014 to 2.15 in 2024. So housing is for households, not for individuals. That's why we're looking at the household size. The 2024 population is now arranged into 74,068 households. But the key takeaway from this is the number of households grew by 3.8%, which is more than double the rate of population growth. The increase in the number of households is driven by the consistently shrinking household size, with more 1 to 2 person households than in previous years. Between 2014 and 2024, the number of 1 person households increased, while the number of 4 or more person households declined. Number of 2 and 3 person households stayed relatively consistent. But as you can see in the pie chart, as of 2024, we are predominantly made up of 1 person and 2 person households. It's really quite interesting. The decrease in the number of 4 person households went from 20.6% to 16.9%, and the number of 1 person households went from 27.6 to 30.2. Sorry, I lost my arrow. There we go. This is a really critical slide. Aging population is reshaping households in the region. You can see the growth in the 65 and over population, which is reflective of the greater number of 1 and 2 person households. You're thinking empty nesters, you're thinking widowed residents. We have fewer families with children. So we've had a massive decline in school-aged population, 5 to 17 years old. We're also missing a middle-aged population, ages 45 to 54. These are also households you would expect to have older children. So despite our total rebound in overall population, the makeup and the structure of our population is dramatically changing. The people who have replaced the residents that left don't match the residents that we had back in 2014. Just to put some numbers to this, the number of residents aged 5 to 17 declined from 15.6 in 2014 to 13.9 in 2019 to 12.7 in 2024. Residents aged 45 to 55 went from 16.9 in 2014 to 15.2 in 2019 to 12.5 in 2024. Residents 65 to 75 increased from 9.4% in 2014 to 11.5% in 2019 to 12.7% in 2024. And if you look on the line graph, you can see the convergence of our younger population with our older population. They're kind of meeting in the middle. So taken together, well, we'll look at the school district enrollment first. Between 2014 and 2024, the region saw school enrollment decline by 3,705 students. That's a 16% drop. That's consistent with the decline we're seeing in that school-aged child population. While some of this might reflect a switch to private school or homeschooling, that's not accounting for our overall drop in population of school-aged children in the region. So taken all together, demographic data is suggesting that the region is transitioning towards an older, smaller household population, experiencing a housing demand that's driven by household formation rather than population growth. And we're seeing a reduced presence of children and family-aged adults. And all of these things are reflecting more of a structural change in our population. Moving into housing characteristics, why are we looking at them? We're looking at them because they tell us what our current housing supply looks like, so that we can assess whether the supply of housing that we have matches the needs of our population. So our key data points here, we're looking at total number of units, unit type, unit size, the age and condition of units, and tenure, whether people rent or own. Key takeaways here, our housing supply has grown, but slowly. So our total units increased about 2% since 2014. So we now have about 82,963 units. Our vacancy rates are declining. Our total number of vacant units is 8,895, which reflects a 10.7% vacancy rate. But of those, 5,392 are seasonal units. So our year-round vacancy is much lower. If we remove the seasonal units, that leaves us with about a 4.2% vacancy rate, which is quite tight. If you think about it, a healthy vacancy is anywhere between 5 and 8%. This shows us that market conditions are tightening over time. So our year-round vacancy changed from 5.7% to 6.5% to 4.2%. And we are seeing a reduction in the number of those units that are seasonal. That's suggesting that perhaps more of these seasonal units are being converted to year-round use and helping to absorb some of the influx of households. Overcrowding still in our region remains relatively low, but it is increasing. So households with one or more person per room, that's not per bedroom, that's per room, went from 70,083 in 2014 to 73,235 in 2024. You can see severe overcrowding, which is 1.5 or more persons per room, is following the same trajectory, though is much lower. Our overall pattern is showing a slow but steady upward pressure on our housing market. Our unit type has remained relatively consistent over time. You can see our supply is predominantly single-family detached. There's been very little change in that makeup over the last 10 years. Unit size, it's made up of predominantly 2, 3, and 4 bedroom units, which remains, again, unchanged over the last 10 years. Though there has been a small but notable increase in 1-bedroom units during that time, which also might reflect some of the shift to smaller households. Our age of our housing stock as of 2024, about 313 units were built after 2020. That's what's reported. And again, it's an estimate. About 3,360 units were built between 2010 and 2019. In the 90s and 2000s, we saw about 7,000 units being built per year, but most of the region's housing stock was built prior to 1990. And the unit condition is kind of reflective of that aging housing stock. Deficiencies are increasing over time, with kitchen-related issues, houses with incomplete kitchens are rising more rapidly than plumbing conditions. And there has been also minimal change in the breakdown of owner to renter occupied units over time. There are still comparatively few rental opportunities across the region. Our deed restricted housing units increased very slightly between, they increased more significantly between 2014 and 2019, and then tapered off between 2019 and 2024, leaving us with about 186 deed restricted units. And you can see that the deed restricted units specifically make up a very small portion of our overall assisted units, which qualify under 830G. So this is our last slide in our housing characteristics data. Taken all together, the data suggests that the region is experiencing demographic aging with household downsizing, which is increasing housing demand driven by smaller households rather than more people. And there is declining housing flexibility due to limited new construction and older single-family heavy housing stock. There is a tightening in the owner and rental markets despite the slow population growth based on these trends and the conversion of seasonal units into year-round residences. Moving into jobs and workforce. Why are we looking at these? Because jobs and workforce tell us about our economy, helps us understand who's filling the jobs in the region and where they're commuting from. And when they're compared with our housing characteristics data, they tell us whether our housing supply fits our workers and what additional or different housing we might need to better support them. Our key data points here will be total jobs, job type, wages, age of workers, and a profile of our resident workforce. And I'm going to first and foremost, make a distinction because this got very confusing when we were pulling the data together. We have two different groups. We have workers of regional jobs, and then we have residents who work wherever they work. And there is some overlap between those two categories, but we are going to call them resident workers versus regional job workers. That's our distinction. It is clunky, but it helps us make sense of it. All right, so the total number of jobs in the region is stable, but it's not growing despite recovering to pre-pandemic levels. You can see in 2014, we had 69,811 jobs. We went down to 68,499 in 2019. We are not allowed to compare with overlapping years, but I will say just perusing the data, it looks like the jobs continued to decline through COVID. And then we saw a bit of an upswing and recovery, leaving us with 2024, 70,494 jobs. Notably, the number of jobs that are filled by residents who live here declined from 43.2% in 2014 to 40.7% in 2019 to 37.9% in 2023. So you can see the share of resident workers going down despite the number of jobs growing. Conversely, the number of jobs that are filled by people commuting into the region grew from 56.8% in 2014 to 59.3% in 2019 to 62.1% in 2023. Our top 5 industry sectors for regional jobs have remained constant over time. Our jobs are in manufacturing, retail trade, educational services, healthcare and social assistance, and accommodation and food services. There was a notable decline in retail sector jobs over the last 10 years, despite it remaining one of the top 5 job sectors for the region. That's unsurprising. That is a nationwide trend. Now here we get into some comparisons. You'll see regional job workers on the left and resident workers on the right. So regional job workers being people who work the jobs in the region, regardless of where they live, and resident workers being people who live in the region and work regardless of where they work. So younger workforce overall in both categories, that's 29 and under, has remained stable. There are not many significant changes over time. The core working age population, 30 to 54, is declining again in both categories. We're seeing similar trends. This represents the largest area of loss in the labor force. Our older working force, 55 and older, is growing significantly, increasing their share of the total employment base. And this workforce shift is creating a structural imbalance because the mid-career pipeline is shrinking, leaving a gap in people to replace retiring workers as they age out. And this can create potential hiring challenges for employers in the future. And you can see when you compare workers of regional jobs versus our resident workforce, the trends impacting our resident workforce are accelerated or more dramatic when compared to the general workers of regional jobs. Monthly earnings, same comparison between the two groups. The wages for regional workforce has increased, that's resident workers. Most workers are making more than $3,333 monthly, and this is reflective or consistent with the increase in mid to late career older workers. The lower and middle wage categories are declining consistently, but overall, when you're comparing the two categories, resident workers tend to earn more than the people who are working the regional jobs. Commuter shed. So where are people that are working our regional jobs coming from? They commute from a wide variety of places, but the top three are Meriden, New Britain, and Hartford consistently. Now, switching gears, talking specifically about our resident workforce or resident workers. Resident workforce has declined since 2014, despite the number of regional jobs growing, and despite recovering to pre-pandemic levels. The percent of workforce that's employed within the region has also decreased, while the workforce that commutes out of the region has increased. So even with our lower share of overall workers in the region, the number that are leaving are increasing. And interestingly, the jobs that are worked by our resident workers, the jobs held by our resident workers are the same, top 5, as the jobs in the region. So the top 5 industry sectors are still manufacturing, retail, trade, educational services, healthcare and social assistance, and accommodation and food services. And we still see that same decline in retail sector jobs over the last 10 years. I will say, despite the top 5 industries being the same, there are a lot more jobs of the resident workers that relate to more professional services, think lawyer, think consultant, that type of thing, but not enough to make the top 5. And where are our resident workers going? The ones that work in region are primarily going to Middletown, Old Saybrook, and Essex, although interestingly, Westbrook in 2014. And when they're leaving the region, they're going to Hartford, New Haven, and Wallingford. So that is the close of our economic data. In summary, employment has rebounded modestly above 2014 levels. This indicates more stability rather than actual growth in jobs. Our aging population and reduced mid-career adults are reducing the local workforce that's available to fill our regional jobs, especially in service and care sectors. And many jobs in region are paying less than out-of-region alternatives. When this is combined with rising housing costs, it limits where workers can live. As a result, region is increasingly relying on commuters coming into the region to work regional jobs. And this is an important slide, but it is coming soon. So prior to 2021, the census didn't collect data at the COG level. It was at county level. And because we are not all one county, we will have to aggregate all of the data across the municipalities. And when you're doing things like median income, you can't just average the median of all of the towns. You have to actually collect all of the income data across all of the towns in order to find the regional median income. So because we're doing this as part of the next step where we break all of the data out at the municipal level, we are going to do that process of aggregating across all of the towns once we've pulled all of the town data. So that is coming. It's going to be part of the next deliverable next month. Although a quick perusal of the data is showing us, at least at first glance, that the median income is increasing across the region. So stay tuned, and we will have that for you next month. I want to sum up all of that information. So demographics, we are shifting away from family households. We have a flat population, but rising housing demand. This is due to the change in household size and household formation. The average household size has declined from 2.3 to 2.15, with more one-person households and fewer large families. So that's driving the housing need. And we have an aging community. There is significant growth in residents over 65, along with declines in children and mid-career adults. This is borne out by our declining school enrollment at negative 16%. Our housing market is constrained. We have tightening conditions. Although our new units have increased modestly, we have dramatically declining vacancy rates and a conversion of seasonal units into year-round units. And we have limited diversity in our housing supply. So it remains older, single-family detached, which limits options for the population that we are losing. Our jobs and our workforce, it's supported by tourism and a lot of external demand. We have a stable economy. Jobs recovered to pre-COVID levels, but it didn't reverse any demographic trends. So it's anchored by industries that are resilient, which is a positive, but it's not growth. And we have a worker mismatch. So regional jobs increasingly are requiring workers to commute from outside of the region as the local labor force is shrinking and aging. Many regional jobs, especially in retail, hospitality, and care services, pay lower wages than out-of-region jobs, making local worker retention difficult. And tourism is amplifying all of these pressures because visitor demand and second home use increases the housing utilization, supports service jobs, and intensifies housing competition beyond what we're seeing in the population data. Bottom line, all of these things are influencing each other, and it's creating a structural change. It's reinforcing feedback loops of demographics, housing, and economy that are amplifying each other over time. So I just want to kind of summarize all of this to say all of the major trends are moving in the same direction. The aging population and the shrinking household size means that more housing units are needed, even if there's no population growth. And this is increasing strain on the market, especially when the supply of housing stock is growing slowly and it's limited to a lot of older and single family units. The higher cost because of the strain of these units or constraint in these units, and the limited options are making it harder for young adults and families with children, as well as workers, to move in. So these groups either leave or they're not coming. And this leaves housing available for older and wealthier households or households who owned a second home and decided to make it their year-round residence. This is creating a self-sorting cycle towards older, smaller households. And the housing constraints and workforce changes are also reinforcing each other, as the limited, expensive, and mismatched housing reduces the ability for workers to live near their jobs, especially when the local jobs are paying less than the out-of-region options. So the region will increasingly import labor, which means fewer and fewer residents are going to both live and work in the region. And this is, again, reinforcing the occupancy of units by retirees and wealthier households or second homeowners. And all of this is amplified by lifestyle or tourism and the value of the region for those things. It supports outside spending and wealth and supports employment without population growth. Did we lose my PowerPoint? There we go. Is that doing that on your end too, or is that just my end?
It went off for a second, but it came back.
It's telling me I'm done. I'm wrapping up, I promise. So if the median income and the wealth in the region is increasing, that is again a reinforcing it's a product of and a reinforcement of the trend, because higher wealth households can better absorb the housing costs while families and younger workers are increasingly priced out. And as families and younger workers are priced out, we're losing school enrollment. And losing school enrollment leads to school consolidation and fewer amenities for families and children, which makes the region less appealing to families and children, and the cycle repeats. So that is what we are looking at the moment. It's not great. The end. Any
I see
questions?
you joined us. I didn't know if you wanted to handle questions, or I can kind of moderate if people put their hands up. If anyone has questions on any of that.
Or can
Michael.
they put it in the chat too?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Michael, go ahead.
Thanks, Eliza. Where there has been a bounce in the 2024 data, or I think you answered this, but I just wanted to clarify. We're going to be looking out 10 years on this plan. So are you going to treat that as a sort of a one-time recovery event, or try to incorporate that into some sort of leading edge of a trend? But how do you project that forward, the pandemic dip and then the 2024 recovery?
So I don't see the trend. I don't see any suggestion that there is going to be further growth. None of the trends that we're seeing are projecting growth. We saw the rebound, but we're also seeing a structural shift. I think we can project that those trends are going to continue.
So where there's things like the aging and the household formation and the household size, those are long established.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Good. That's what I thought. Just want to clarify. Thank you.
I have a question. I'm physically raising my hand. How do these trends compare with outside of our region, like the rest of the state, the rest of the New England region and the country?
So we have not collected all of the state data. Some of the trends we do know the state as a whole is aging. We do know that the state as a whole has had slow job growth. other than that, we can look at things like median age, we can look at things like household size. I think it's going to be relatively consistent, although I think my impression is that our region is going to be accelerated, perhaps.
Yeah, I
for some
think
of these
didn't we
trends.
see, Megan, that like the state is following, but we're doing it harder and
Faster.
faster.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. Yep.
But we didn't look at everything, as she mentioned.
Mhm. We can take some information from what we know about our workers that are commuting in. They are younger and they're coming from other places outside of the region. So we know that we're having to import our workers from elsewhere. Those regional statistics from the region that they are coming from might be different from what we're seeing for ours. We also know, for example, all of the electric boat changes in the CCOG region are going to change their outlook going forward.
Anyone else?
I assume you'll share the link or the presentation for this?
Yes, in fact, we are going to package it up for you, and that will be a takeaway for you to have. And we have all of the data tables cited on there as well.
Thank you.
I do want to, it's pretty, from an academic perspective, it was fascinating pulling all of this data together in that every piece that we looked at reinforced the story that was coming together about the trajectory of the region. From the perspective of someone who lives and works in the region, of course, it's distressing. But I will say it does not have to be the trajectory. We are doing this plan, we are looking at this data so that we can come up with strategies to break this cycle so that it does not have to continue this way into the future if that is not what we want to see.
Hey, Megan, what have you heard in terms of CCOG perspective on whether or not they can manage the enormous growth in their manufacturing numbers?
Yeah, I
It
know
seems
that
like we would be a good fit to help with that housing piece.
absolutely. I think that if that is something that we want to focus on, and we make ourselves a hospitable location for workers to live and commute, I think that that is something within our capability to do. I know that CCOG, that's going to be a focus of their plan going forward. They're going to have to take into account what the job changes are going to mean for their region.
Thank you.
Mhm. I have stunned you all.
Overwhelming amount of information.
Well, this lines up with we through a grant we received with Ben Lovejoy's help, and Ben's on the call. We've had Goldman in New York doing analysis. In fact, tomorrow is the last presentation where they're going to tell us what they found for inventory of where we can build,
Mhm.
and it's not looking good. But everything they've done so far for our region is, we have 4,000 residents and 2,000 units, lines right up. The ages
Mhm.
all line right up. It's I get it. When you mentioned we could change it or stay the same, I guess another way to put that is like, do we just lean into the fact that we're becoming a senior region, and what would that mean? Because if there's no place to build, where it ends up, it isn't just as matter of like once people age out of their homes or die or whatever. If these homes are all, the slide that you don't have, and I shared this with you after they presented it, is
Mhm.
the average cost of housing in our region, which includes Westbrook, that when they did this for us, includes Essex, includes Chester, it's
Mhm.
getting close to 400,000. So these certainly aren't entry level homes, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
even if our full stock or half of our stock became available, it's like, oh, now we have a huge vacancy. It isn't necessarily going to bring in families with young children because they aren't
Right.
gonna be able to afford it. So I guess that's where my stun would be. It's like, okay, here's where we're at. We could lean into it. It seems to be a huge a huge gap between fulfilling your need for a population that we don't have because it's gone away.
Yeah.
So we're gonna have to think about how to convert these big houses into apartments or get that so that they can become multifamily or duplexes and get rid of that stigma, because you're right, there's gonna be a whole bunch of empty McMansions out there. Sorry, my camera's not working.
Yeah, I was looking for you.
It will not function today.
I think, Daniel, that's a really valid point that looking at there are challenges that come with both options, right? There are challenges that would come with leaning into being a retirement community, and there are challenges that would come with trying to reverse some of these trends. And there might also be a middle ground in between where we just try and balance a little bit better to make ourselves more resilient and not be one thing or the other thing. And maybe a good exercise for this group would be to look at what the pros and cons of these different options are and what that would mean for the region and what the different steps for those options might be.
So you wrote our proposal for us for Growing York. So you know that one of the things that we asked them to do as a deliverable was to take the weight off of us to say, well, which demographic could we serve better if we find a place to build? So again, that presentation is tomorrow, but
Yeah.
I'm betting when I look at your presentation against what they've shown us already, that the path of least resistance would be to lean into the current population as opposed to, but I don't know what they're going to say to us until tomorrow. But that's what we shifted it to them to say, you tell us. Well, we know we have all these needs, but what's the best one?
Yeah, and your challenge is there to come back to jobs, right, and services that come with serving an older population, or if you're leaning also into, wealthier retirees or second home owners, that's more of like a lifestyle economy. Retaining workers for both of those types of jobs, they tend to pay lower, they tend to be younger. Where are they coming from? How are they getting here? If everyone in the state leaned into that, who would work the jobs? So that's a challenge that would have to be addressed.
We
I have a
talked about
question.
the school-age children too. Sorry, let me just finish this thought, Megan. When we were like discussing this, when we were obtaining the data, was if you're leaning into that, hey, we'll just be a retirement community, what is happening to your schools? We already are seeing schools across the region consolidating or closing. The shocking decline in the region that Chester, Essex, and Deep River are in, it was the largest decline by far in school-age children in our entire region. If Connecticut or our region can't say, yeah, no, we have really good schools, like that's a major problem for us too, because we do kind of hang our hat on that, I think, around here. So that's just something to think about as well.
And you're going back to workers again, your pipeline, right? If you're losing younger residents, and your older residents are retiring, who's filling the job vacancies? I put a lot of stock in the workforce.
Well,
The question I had was, can you extrapolate the 65 plus that are single residents in houses? Is there any way to do that? Because I see it in my town, and maybe part of the problem is there isn't an attractive 65 plus place to go to. I mean, that guy, I have them in their 90s, and over their dead body are they leaving that house? And it becomes a problem because not only is the fact that they're in the house 20 years beyond the point where they can take care of it. So there I have a declining, a house that just is falling apart per se. But is it also part of our problem because we don't write up regulations that allow 55 plus that is a little more attractive or something? I'm just, I look at it and I go, why haven't they looked? And I just don't know, because if they sold it, they would have enough assets to go to one of those places, but you can't pay them. It's not happening.
Yeah, but those
Right.
places don't exist. I mean, I think that's part of it. That was one of the things we're looking at for our need is we have anecdotal story. Well, my neighbor, she's 84. She's very involved in the community. She looked and looked and looked. She sold her house. She's living across the state now with her, at her daughter's essentially.
Okay.
And she has money for a place. I mean, she gave up a beautiful home. She has money. She could get another home. She doesn't want to get another big home. She's in her 80s. She gave it, but there's no right sizing, is the word I like there. So I'm curious. I'd be more curious to find out about those jobs. When I hear the thing about like jobs, still the same. I've seen that movie before. It's like there's a difference between a manufacturing job that can support a household and working at McDonald's. And so sometimes when we see like more of those service jobs, they simply aren't the same income level. I'd be curious with the next level of that you said when you're going to start breaking down those medium incomes and looking back what you've already done to see, well, what are those jobs, and then that'll help us think about what do we need to provide, I guess.
Yeah.
If I can just piggyback too on what James was saying, I also live and work in the same town as him in East Haddam. First, I just want to say though, Megan, thank you so much for that presentation. It was so digestible. And I mean, I don't know if James feels this way, but I feel like your presentation was like East Haddam is like a microcosm of it. It just everything. I was like, oh boy, this is validating everything I've thought was maybe happening in our town. And I am very familiar with some of those same residents who will not leave their homes, even though they are not safe to be living in them anymore. But I would say I also see and hear from a lot of elderly residents who know that they can't manage a home anymore. And they want so badly for an alternative, but there isn't enough of that senior housing stock. But I also see a need for affordable and low income. I just feel like every town needs more of each category. And that way you can draw in new homeowners and younger, families, and also maintain and offer safe housing for the residents that have lived there their whole lives. So to me, it feels like we just need a increase in the diversity of housing in our town, and probably in many towns.
Yeah.
Ben?
Great job as always, to both of you for this work that you're doing. To Daniel's point, we've had this conversation and I mentioned it last time we met with Deep River. I kind of presented the first select woman yes, are all the houses being sold that you have available? Is the vacancy rate low? Is there a good match? All of those things, yes. And in many ways, there is an argument to retain the status quo. But I was kind of explaining that a lot of this planning we do is future. It's visioning. It's thinking about what is the future of your town. And while, yes, it's kind of strange to think 5, 10, 15, 20 years out for some people, when it actually comes to the construction of the housing units that people are talking about, it is a 5 to 10 year process often. And so some of the seeds that you're planting now, some of the people on the call may not even see the fruition of this. But it's like a process because this stuff takes so long, and you may not be involved in even working in the towns by the time that some of this stuff ends up kind of coming up. But I think it's important to signal, from the state's perspective, we're looking at working and engaging with municipalities that tell us what they want to build and where they want to build it. We use that expression all the time. And we have unprecedented levels of, funding available to help subsidize the cost of this, because as we were on the call the other day, Megan, with OPM, this isn't really happening at that deeply affordable level unless there's significant state subsidy, and we can't help build anything unless we know what the towns want to do. And part of this whole planning process is to signal where we can make these targeted investments and where the state can step in and support a municipality. But in many ways, we're not going to go where we're not asked to be. That is not a priority for us to come into spaces and fight it. So I think in many ways, like, you have this opportunity to look at all these demographics, look at all these trends, look at all these changes, and a town can sort of signal, hey, this is where we're headed. And it may be a different CEO in place at the time when those are a different town manager or new planner staff, but the length of time it takes to get some of this stuff done, it takes so long that you're at a critical junction right now to sort of set the town on a path towards something different, or again, continue what is an elongated process of status quo. So thank you for putting together, like Andrea said, easy to digest stuff. That demographics number is the most striking one, and it's the one I talk about all the time. You can maintain the exact same population, but if you could put 4 people in the house before and now you can only put 2, you're going to have a shortage. And that's kind of what we're facing right now. So keep up the good work. And again, signal to us what you want to do and where you want to put it.
Thanks, Ben.
Sheila.
Hi, thanks. I just want to echo Megan. Thank you. Very comprehensive and digestible. So thank you. I think Andrea, you said the word digestible. I really appreciate that. I just want to kind of delve into a little bit more the idea of there being nowhere local or very few options locally for people in that 65 and older range to go. And thinking as a from now for the rest of my life resident of Old Lyme, I can totally understand obviously why people, it doesn't have to be Old Lyme, it can be anywhere. You want to stay where you want to stay. It's what you know, it's where you've been. We're dealing with that with my mother-in-law in Guilford. And frankly, she was in short-term care for 5 months, in and out of the hospital. And she was in Essex because that was where there was a place that was very viable for her. So I'm wondering if there is something more to this concept. And I do realize it's a long-term solution, if you will, somewhat, because it's not going to happen next month. But, is looking at, as a region, investing in places that can help to develop, and by develop, I mean maybe in existing spots and buildings that are there, or completely from the ground up, more assisted living type options, because frankly, that's another area of the workforce that is suffering, which is why people are so picky and choosy, if they can be, where they're going to take, where they're going to go, or where they're going to take their parents. So it just really, that just struck me when you said that, and just wanted to add my 2 cents. Thanks.
Thank you. Eliza, I just want to, before we move on to the next thing, I just want to throw out there as kind of a homework thinking point for the next meeting. Ben had mentioned visioning, and as we've talked to communities, a lot of the things that we hear that they love most about their towns, we hear a lot about great schools. We hear a lot about downtowns and main streets, vibrancy of shops, places to go. Think about those things. Think about the things that you love about your community. And when we come back, we'll talk about how those things are impacted by these demographic and housing trends. And that might influence what you want to do as far as the direction you want to go.
Cool. Pat, I'm just going to jump in and just give my quick 2-second update on the shared foundations, because that's next on the agenda. And I know we've been trying to keep these meetings to an hour, and we're almost there. So some of you know, but most of you don't, that we finished up our 3rd lesson, which is navigating difficult conversations in the public meeting arena, using affordable housing as a baseline example. We held a focus group where we gave that lesson, and right now we're in the middle of making changes to it based on feedback we received. And I think that we will probably be talking to Chester soon, if we can make that schedule work. With that, we've done lesson 1 on community visioning in Chester and Old Saybrook now. And be on the lookout for lesson 2, which is about public engagement. I think that we are going to probably hold a session for commissioners here at RiverCog with a very limited number of seats, just to get people from around the region to maybe show up. So we will let you know when that's going to happen.
Thank you, Eliza. Any questions for Eliza on the shared foundations? The focus group for the third lesson was very interesting. So some different perspectives based on the size of your community and how business is conducted. So it's pretty interesting. All right. If there are no questions, just anything else, ladies, for us? I know you were looking for comments on, what is it, the OPM?
Oh, yes. The housing growth guidance from OPM. And we did receive a few comments from a few of you. So thank you so much to the people that sent that in. I'm composing the letter now, and we will have that sent over to OPM in the next few days, which is their deadline. I don't even know what the date is today, but I think it's the 30th.
28th. It's due the 30th.
Thank you.
So send them quickly.
All right, so if there's nothing else, we're right up on our deadline here, so great. So the next meeting will be May 26th. Is that after Labor Day or Memorial Day?
Yep.
It is after. Did we decide to do it then? We did, right?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you everyone today for participating. Have a good rest of your day and a good month, and we'll all talk soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.